Hi everybody, my name is Travis and this is the Daily Travesty, and we are continuing our set of draft videos for players who are new to drafting in Magic the Gathering and want to learn a little bit of what it's about. In the last video, we talked about the value of staying open or drafting a particular color pair at the table that no one else at the table is drafting, and how you can get set up with a more powerful deck, more powerful cards later on in the draft, and build, in general, better decks and win more. And what this video is going to be about is how to determine what is open. In the last video, I talked about signaling and, oh, this card signals that this is open or this might be open. But in Strixhaven specifically, which cards might indicate that a certain color is open? And really what this comes down to is how do we evaluate cards in Limited, in Draft? And it's quite a bit different than how you evaluate cards in Standard. Certainly very, very powerful cards in Standard or other constructed formats can be really good in Limited, but sometimes there's a little bit of a difference there. In general, your draft decks aren't going to be as streamlined or as efficient as your Standard decks. You obviously don't have access to every kind of card. So there are certain strategies that pay off more in Draft than they do in Standard. So let's take a look at that. Let's go into our collection here, and I'm just going to look at cards in Strixhaven that signal that color is open. Again, these are cards that you are seeing come around the table late. People haven't picked them in the first couple picks, and you see them third or fourth pick in one of the packs, and that should get you thinking, hey, maybe this color is open. I'm not going to focus on rares and mythic rares. Obviously, if a really, really good black mythic rare comes around the table to you, that's a signal that black might be open. But more often than not, those cards get snapped up and you're not going to see them as often. So what we're going to look at is the commons. It's funny, in Limited, you tend to focus more on commons because you're going to see a lot more of these kinds of cards. And that is where you're getting most of your signals from. So it's important to know which of the commons are the most powerful for each color, and then that's an indicator to you if that color is open or not. This is just a very general discussion. If you want an in-depth discussion of all the different cards and their power levels and how they can be used in Strixhaven Draft, I recommend checking out some of the other YouTube channels, podcasts, videos that are out there. Limited Resources is a really good one. They have a podcast and a YouTube channel. There's another one called Lords of Limited, which I haven't watched, but I'm sure is totally fine. The hosts on that show know what they're talking about as well. And you can watch hours and hours of professional Magic players talking about the cards and how powerful they are. That is not what we're going to do today. We're just going to quickly talk a little bit about what are signals in Strixhaven and why those cards might be better than other cards. So looking at white first, these are the white commons in Strixhaven. Something like Expel, that's a little bit of a signal. I mean, this card isn't amazing. It is a card you want in your deck. It's good. You should be taking it, putting it in your deck. The fact that it can only exile tap creatures isn't great if your deck is more aggressive. But hey, it still says exile a creature on it at instant speed. This card is very good. 3 mana, exile anything that's attacking you is really, really good. And so if this is a card that is coming to you later in a draft, that might be a signal that white is partially open. Or it might not. Pilgrim of the Ages, really, really good card. I think people are starting to realize that this card is something you do want in your deck. It makes your deck more consistent on getting to 4 mana, which is really important in Strixhaven. And you can just attack with this. Sometimes get a bit of damage in. You can block with it, and it's really annoying for your opponent because it comes back later, draws you more lands. So this is a card I would say is probably a signal in white. Combat Professor, also a signal in white. This is a very, very good white common. By itself, it's a 3/3 flying vigilance for 4 mana. That's really good. And it can make combat really difficult for your opponent because you can pump up other creatures. You get all the power. You get to decide what you're going to attack with. Maybe you just attack with a different creature one at a time and slowly whittle your opponent down. Really, really nice card. Might be a signal. And that's kind of all I want to start with. Obviously, signals are super deep and it's a little bit difficult. But those 3 cards are enough to get started with. Something like Inkling Summoning is also a signal. People really want the lesson cards. They're really powerful. The learn lesson mechanic is really powerful. This is probably the best summoning card, next to the Fractal Summoning or the Spirit Summoning, Elemental Summoning, these kinds of things. This is one of the best ones. And so if this card is coming around the table, you know that people probably aren't in white or black as much. So that can be a bit of a signal. And all of these cards that we've just looked at demonstrate some of the more powerful effects that you're looking for in a draft deck. First one, Expel. This is known as a removal spell. This is a card that kills one of your opponent's creatures. Limited games or draft games are basically about smashing creatures into each other. It's a lot of creature combat, a lot of combat math. Unlike standard or other constructed formats where you have very efficient spells, a lot of instant sorceries, powerful enchantments, powerful lands, in draft, you're basically just attacking and blocking. That's what it boils down to. So something that can remove an opponent's creature at instant speed as well is going to be really powerful. You want cards that kill your opponent's creatures. Something like Inkling Summoning, really, really good because it has flying. It turns out that when you're smashing creatures into each other, I'm sure everyone here has come into this situation where you have a bunch of creatures, they have a bunch of creatures, and no one can attack anyone. And then someone plays a flying creature and the other person doesn't have flying, and you're able to just slowly chip them down and win with a flyer. This is something we call evasion. So creatures with evasion, creatures that fly, creatures that are unblockable, these can be very powerful as well. So like a 3 mana 2/1 flyer is way better than a ground creature. 2 mana 2/2, 3 mana 2/2, 3 mana 3/3, because it's able to fly over your opponent's creatures, and you can win a lot of games that way. So you're looking for evasion. Same thing with the Combat Professor. This one also has evasion, has flying. Next, after looking at removal, cards that kill your opponent's creatures, cards that have evasion, like this Combat Professor, you're looking for cards that have really good abilities. Something like this Ageless Guardian, 2 mana 1/4, no other text. This card is very plain, very basic. It's going to do exactly what it says on the card. It's a 2 mana 1/4. It doesn't attack particularly well. It kind of blocks, but not even that great. What you want to look for next are cards that have really good abilities, like Pilgrim of the Ages. This will always get you to your 4th mana. Getting more mana is good because you can play your more expensive spells, and you can keep bringing it back. If you get to 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 mana and your opponent is trying to kill you and you have one of these in play, it's really hard for them to kill you because you can just block with it, it dies, tap your mana, bring it back, play it next turn, get another land, block with it the next turn, it dies, you bring it back, play it again. It's really, really annoying. Really, really good ability. So Pilgrim of the Ages, much, much better than something like Ageless Guardian, which has no abilities on it. Other cards with good abilities. Well, Combat Professor. We already talked about how this card has good evasion. It can be a 3/3 flyer on its own, but the ability is really powerful. You can give other creatures vigilance. You can give other creatures the ability to attack and block in the same round. If draft is about smashing creatures into your opponent and them smashing back, this card gives you the ability to do both. So really, really nice cards there as an example. Removal spells, cards with evasion, cards with good abilities. That's what you want to look for in draft. And it's usually in that order. If you watch some of these other podcasts I'm talking about, Limited Resources, Lords of Limited, and that, sometimes they'll talk about the BREAD model, BREAD, which stands for bombs, which are like the most powerful cards in the set, removal, evasion, abilities, and then D's for dudes. So just random dudes that do nothing is the lowest priority. So again, BREAD. Bombs, which are the most powerful cards in the set, then removal, then creatures with evasion, then creatures with good abilities, and then random dudes after that. right? Those are the building blocks for a draft deck. So those are some of the signals in white. Inkling Summoning is a signal in white and black. I think Silverquill Pledge Mage can be a signal in white and black as well. Rise of Exodus, again, really powerful removal spell. It's a little bit expensive at 6 mana, but it exiles anything, and you get to learn off of it. So this is a removal spell and an ability kind of rolled together. So this is a huge signal for black and white. Yeah, I don't know if Pledge Mage, Lorehold Pledge Mage, or Stonebound Mentor are good enough to be signals for red-white. All right, let's go to blue. What are some signals in blue? Frost Trickster. This is one of the best commons in Strixhaven, and you are totally fine taking this card first in your first pack. Why? It has evasion, it flies, and it has a really, really good ability. This card is good at any point in the game. You can always tap down a creature either to help you attack better or to tap down a creature that your opponent is killing you with, and it gives you a few more turns to essentially not die and draw cards to get out of that situation. So Frost Trickster, great card, evasion and abilities. And it's kind of like a pseudo removal spell. It removes a creature for a couple turns. So really, really nice card. If you see these coming second, third, fourth pick in the pack, that might be a signal that blue is open. In our last video, we actually saw one of these come around later, and we thought maybe blue is open. Turns out it wasn't. Pop Quiz is okay. I don't know if it's a super strong signal, but Bury in Books is definitely a signal. This is a very, very good removal spell. It is kind of a hard one to assess because it looks like it basically just delays you for a couple turns. If you get rid of a really powerful creature with this card, some players will think, oh, well, it's just going to come back. That's not great. But the thing is, you're actually removing it for a couple turns. Your opponent then has to redraw it, which means they're drawing one less card in the game, which is really powerful. And there's a lot of tokens in the Strixhaven draft. And this, I mean, you can't put a token creature into a library. It just kills it outright. It can also cost 3 if you're being attacked. This card is great. If Bury in Books comes around late, that is a signal that maybe you should be in blue. Other things that are signals in blue. Well, I think Elemental Masterpiece might be a signal to blue, red. I've seen these cards go pretty late. I don't know if people are taking them super highly, so maybe it's not as big of a signal, but this is a great card to put in your blue-red deck. Spectacle Mage, definitely a signal for the blue-red deck specifically. You want this deck, or this card in all of your blue-red decks. If you see these coming late, that might be an indicator to go into blue-red. A good example of that is maybe in your first couple picks, you're taking like Frost Trickster, you're taking Bury in Books, you're not sure if you're going to be in blue-red or blue-green, and then you see a card like Spectacle Mage come up, and you're like, oh, well, maybe blue-red is open, and you take this as a speculation that maybe that's a card you want. I found Prismari Pledge Mage to be very great in blue-red decks. I don't know if it's a signal necessarily, but this is a card I would take pretty highly after I already knew I was in blue-red. Elemental Summoning, not really a signal. It's just a great card, so when you see it, I mean, you should feel pretty good about taking it. Again, this card can go in blue-red, but it can also go in blue-green. It can go in red-white. Really, really nice lesson card to pick up. So a minor signal, but I feel like people are just taking these regardless. So, and you probably should too. Needlethorn Drake is really good in the blue-green deck, but I don't think it's a signal. It's a card that you always want in blue-green, but people aren't taking it super highly, so I wouldn't necessarily look to that. Same with Biomathematician. Eureka Moment and Quandrix Pledge Mage can be signals as well. Something like this Pledge Mage is really hard to evaluate because, again, it can go in blue-green, it can go in blue-red somewhat, it can go in green-black. So this is a signal that something dealing with green or blue might be open. That's a little bit harder to read than, say, seeing like a Frost Trickster come around and you know it's specifically blue that's open. But again, Quandrix Pledge Mage can be a signal. This is a good card. And if you're trying to pick between a couple color combinations, like, oh, should I be in blue-red or blue-green? Maybe this leans you more towards blue-green. Eureka Moment is a nice blue-green card. Again, might be a bit of a signal that the Quandrix decks are open. Fractal Summoning is also good. It's in the same boat as the Elemental Summoning, where this could be blue-green, green-black, blue-red. Again, we're just looking at commons. Obviously, rares can be signals. Uncommons are more often than not going to be your signals because you're going to see more of them, and they're very powerful compared to the commons usually. But we're just going to focus a little bit on commons today. Lash of Malice is pretty good. I don't know if this is a strong signal for black. People seem to be taking these cards a little bit later. They've realized that getting more creatures is actually important in this format too. But Lash of Malice is really good. Could be a signal for black. I feel like Hunt for Specimens is a signal for black. You actually saw us in the last video take this card and try to play black with it. And then eventually came off of it. But I think Hunt for Specimens is a great card to have in a black deck. Make a creature, learn, and if you see these, that could be a signal that black is open. Mage Hunter's Onslaught. I've been seeing a lot of these cards go by. I don't know if people are taking them super highly, but again, this fits the bill. This is a removal spell. It kills any creature in play. Maybe it's a little bit expensive, costing 4 mana, but I think you're always going to be happy to have this card in your black decks, and this should be a signal to you. If this comes 6th or 7th pick, maybe there aren't a ton of people playing black. We already talked about Inkling Summoning. Silverquill Pledge Mage is kind of a signal. I think this card is really good in the black-white deck. Rise of Exodus again, we talked about. Blood Researcher, also an excellent signal for black-green. I feel like anyone who's in black-green is going to take this almost over almost anything. So if you see this card coming late, maybe there aren't a ton of black-green drafters at the table. Let's take a look at red. In red, Heated Debate, this card is great. You can definitely take this card first out of a pack. This is a great removal spell. It can't be countered. 4 damage kills almost anything in the format that you want to kill, even some of the Elder Dragons. It's an instant speed. This card is great. If you see these coming around, that means is a heavy signal that red is open, because there aren't many cards I would start a draft with over Heated Debate. And it's a common. I mean, this common is better than a lot of the uncommons and better than a lot of rares because it can kill almost anything. Pigment Storm, to an extent, is a signal. I think this card is powerful, but it costs 5 mana. It's way worse than Heated Debate. I mean, you're paying 5 mana at sorcery speed to deal 5 damage to a creature versus 3 mana at instant speed, deal 4 damage to a creature. So Pigment Storm is an okay signal. It's not super strong. I think Heated Debate is more of a strong signal. We already talked about Spectacle Mage being a blue-red signal. That's kind of it. I don't think there are a ton of red-white signals because these cards are just okay. Green. I think that Mage Duel, this is one of the best commons as well. Green doesn't have a lot of ways to kill opponent's creatures. Again, we always go back to removal. So if you have a Mage Duel, that's great. This is also a card you can start a draft with as your first pick. If these come around 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th pick in a pack, that's an indicator to you that maybe green is open. Because people took not this card, so what did they take? I don't know, but they aren't taking green. I don't think Field Trip is a big signal. This card is good. I do like having these in the green decks, particularly the green-blue decks. But I feel like this isn't a huge signal for people right now. people aren't taking these super early like they were at the beginning of the format a month ago. Professor of Zoomancy is a really good card. Again, it puts more power and toughness into play, but I don't think it's a huge signal. 4 mana, 4/3, make a 1/1 is great, but you're not taking this card super early. If you are playing green, you should definitely play this card, though. And that's kind of it. We already talked about these cards. Any colorless cards that are signals? No. Taking lessons is really good, especially the colorless lessons. We talked a little bit about that in the last video, but something like environmental sciences, really good to make your deck more consistent. If you have ways to learn, sometimes you just need your 3rd land or your 4th land. Sometimes you're playing a 2-color deck. You still want this card. Obviously, if you're playing in 3 colors or you're splashing and you're adding a couple cards of a different color to your deck, this is going to help you. We haven't really talked about splashing yet in these videos. We might talk about it, but not right now. Obviously, these cards can go in any deck, though, so that's really nice. It makes them a higher priority than they would be normally. All right, so we took a look through some of the common cards in Strixhaven and evaluated them based on how high of a priority they are, which helps you draft better, but it also helps you understand when you're receiving signals from other players, when something might be open, when no one else is drafting white or red, for example. If you're seeing very late Expels or Pilgrim of the Ages or very late combat professors, maybe white is open and you might consider pivoting into that color if it's available to you. One thing I do want to mention right now is the sort of trap that people fall into of trying to pick the best color pair. What is the best type of deck? Obviously in Strixhaven, if you've seen any of the Strixhaven stuff, there are 5 colleges. There's white-red Lorehold, there's white-black Silverquill, there's red-blue Prismari, there's blue-green Quandrix, and there's black-green Witherbloom. And a lot of people will debate and discuss, oh, which color pair is the best? It's a bit of a trap, because if you can find the colors that are open at the table, your average card quality is going to be much higher than everyone else. Even if you think Quandrix blue-green is the best color pair, if there are 3 people taking blue-green cards at the table, and you're the only one taking Lorehold red-white, your deck on average is going to be much better than all 3 of those players' decks, even if blue-green is technically better. So when you're first starting out in draft, I don't think it helps you to think about which color pair is the most powerful. I think it helps you to learn how to stay open first. And then you can start getting into some of those other nuances, like, oh, would I rather be in blue-green off the start and then hedge that way? That's something that you can pick up later, but I think in general it's to your benefit to just try and find what's open. We are going to stop there. Thanks for listening. My name's Travis, and this has been the Daily Travesty.